Nicolas Weber from Liechtenstein. He represents the company Amazing Blocks, who has engaged in legally compliant tokenization in Liechtenstein. And in previous panels, we actually heard from people critique of the legislation in Liechtenstein as perhaps too complex and dividing tokens into many categories. And it is very interesting to hear the perspective of Nicolas on whether this jurisdiction is probably suitable for issuing tokens and doing an STO. So Nicolas, it's a pleasure to see you here and looking forward to your
speech. Thank you for having me, first of all. I'm more than happy to kind of, talk to anyone that may have any issues or questions with this, and to kind of maybe ease this talk a bit. So what we do at Amazing Blocks is we focus on the legally compliant tokenization of shares and assets in Liechtenstein, and hence we provide a tokenization solution for the entire life cycle. We have a blueprint and templates in place for the establishment of a legal entity in Liechtenstein on the one hand, and then on the other hand, our core product consists of a issuance, administration, and investment platform for the entire life cycle of these legal entities and tokenized assets in Liechtenstein. We comply fully with the Liechtenstein authorities, the legal framework, and hence merge tech and law seamlessly. Let's just imagine for a second, and I think as most people here in this conference are familiar with, what tokenization can do, and that you can basically tokenize anything in Liechtenstein. Still, I would just like to briefly introduce you to, for an instance, a new asset class that we are currently in the process of creating, where we in the future also want to build a liquid market. It's classic cars. Obviously, with our solution, any type of asset or traditional company shares like registered or bearer shares can be tokenized. However, I think classic cars is a very feasible use case, which clearly shows this is an industry that is very fragmented. It's very localized, and also usually these cars in the hands of some high net worth individuals. However, especially retail investors or people that do not have the amount of money to pay for like an expensive car like this are usually excluded from this market, and hence tokenization could then be the solution here. And generally also, apart from this, turns an intangible asset into a liquid one, and therefore improves the diversification for investors. You can have a hedge against inflation. I think this is especially in the next couple of years going to be a hot topic, with all the money being printed, and generally it allows you to participate in your dream with a small amount of investment or with a large amount, obviously, as these tokens can be fragmented, or the ownership can be fragmented randomly or as much as wanted. Why is this the case in Liechtenstein? Well, they call it the unique or the token container model, where basically the token acts as a container, or you can also kind of compare it to a pot with flowers in it. This is an example we sometimes use to kind of have a digital embodiment of all these assets and rights in place, which are then the tokens, the true equity tokens, and this is something obviously new in this world. Usually, I think most people or people that are not too familiar with Liechtenstein usually compare it with skiing, mountains, and castles, maybe. However, Liechtenstein is a regulatory pioneer, especially in our opinion, as they have a future-oriented legal and blockchain expertise. On the one hand, they have a kind of a cluster for blockchain startups in Liechtenstein in place, and on the other hand, from a regulatory perspective, they're years ahead. Liechtenstein is a member of the European Economic Area, therefore equity tokens in Liechtenstein have EU passporting, and from a foreign point of view are usually not compared or similar to a normal security. And I think this is a huge benefit also when comparing Liechtenstein to other jurisdictions that also have similar laws with the same degree of coping or addressing the token economy that is going to emerge in the next couple of years. Why is this possible? Obviously, the Liechtenstein Token Act, which has advanced and supervisory rules, and this therefore it allows, especially with our solution in place that we kind of created in order to fully comply with all the necessary steps of the Liechtenstein authorities. It allows to avoid time and costly efforts for assets and share ownership, and generally you do not have the necessary workarounds in place like in other countries. For instance, with our blueprint, you can basically establish and subsequently tokenize your legal entity within a 3 to 4 week period. Obviously, exceptions can apply here, just to be completely transparent. But with the blueprint that we created with our team and our legal experts, this is something that we believe is possible. And yeah, Liechtenstein has a friendly tax legislation. I think most people here that know Liechtenstein are familiar with this. Has a robust investment climate. We experience this ourselves as the Liechtenstein authorities, and also the investors in this space are very supportive of our solution, even though a lot of our core team is not necessarily per se based just in Liechtenstein. It's also in Berlin and Frankfurt. And they're still very helpful in all the aspects that we need to kind of or they need to kind of collaborate with them. They have a liberal corporate law, and one of the core benefits, something that we at Amazing Blocks apply to ourselves, is a bankless incorporation. So what this means is that you can basically found yourself with Ethereum or Bitcoin, for instance, or just generally crypto assets. In the future, CBDCs will also be possible. I assume that you can pay when they're obviously verified and legal. That you can have a bankless incorporation with crypto asset as an initial contribution. We did this ourselves. You, for instance, can check it out on our Medium channel. I wrote an article about the whole process, which kind of details each step of the way that we took to fulfill this. For our clients that approach us, we have a template in place so they can actually take care of this step themselves as well. And I think a benefit here is that obviously you do not need to travel to Liechtenstein to set up a bank account and have to go to notaries, lawyers, and do all the paperwork, because you can basically just continue with your traditional house bank for the operational aspect of your company or legal entity. Generally, Liechtenstein delivers the perfect conditions for setting up a fund with AAA credit rating, and has a modern infrastructure and political stability in place, which is something that is quite important, I assume, with especially a new disruptive technology like blockchain that needs this degree of stability from the jurisdiction, from the regulators, in order to actually acclaim the mainstream adoption that is promised. What are the pain points nowadays with setting up a legal entity? I'm sure some of you know that it's a costly process with a lot of bureaucracy. It's time consuming. You have to travel a lot, something that the Liechtenstein model kind of jettisons. You have a lot of friction with intermediaries involved, especially when talking about ownership transfer, which, for instance, with our platform is a process that is really, like, from a time perspective, much reduced, and also from a perspective of having to go to notaries and lawyers is reduced to a minimum. So therefore you can have an efficient ownership transfer in a matter of, let's say, around 30 minutes. It's a paper-based system, usually nowadays with really any digitization, and a localized investor structure paired with a low degree of innovation. And also from the perspective of just generally the security token space, which is obviously one of the core, or I think, in my personal opinion at least, one of the most disruptive innovations of blockchain. Is like the legal framework is just not on par with what the technology can do, and this is something that Liechtenstein solves, and it solves it efficiently because they do not necessarily talk about blockchain specifically, but they just talk about the trusted technology, which allows you to kind of have a bit more flexibility there and kind of distance themselves a bit from the traditional approach. And therefore, yeah, what is our role in Liechtenstein? With the regulators in place on the one hand, and our legal partners that we have at Amazing Blocks. Then on the other hand, our token-pad software, which we developed and has been audited, and the trusted technology in place, which in our case is Ethereum. We kind of see us as the bridge between these two worlds, the technology and law, but also as the bridge between the traditional world of finance and the blockchain space. With our solution, you can basically have multiple assets tokenized under one umbrella. So what this means is that you can have all kinds of assets like real estate, cars, gold, patents, art, and so on, you name it, basically tokenized, and the amount or the degree of specific different tokens are traditional debt tokens that you can have, the participation rights that you can tokenize, but also obviously the two unique aspects, the equity and ownership tokens, which are, you know, the disruptive parts of the Liechtenstein model. How this looks like is that you have a legal entity in Liechtenstein, as mentioned, which will function as the umbrella for which is also then tokenized, and you can have traditional shares for this, and then you kind of basically place these different assets, legal entity which are legally owned by it, and yeah, and then you can have you can also on top of this have multiple entities with different, you know, spheres of tokenization, which will be then from a balance sheet perspective multiple different AGs, which are similar to an LLC for the American listeners, which are then under this umbrella. And yeah, and how could it finally look like that? You basically have like a whole portfolio with tokenized equity of all these different, you know, assets, which tend to be, or at least used to be, highly illiquid, and now you can have a liquid market in place, and in the future, for instance, you could technically even use them as collateral on DeFi protocols or so. In Liechtenstein, generally, they rely on three different pillars: the legal contract, the tokenization aspect, which obviously is fulfilled by smart contracts. I think I do not have to go into detail here. And then you have these different tokens where the ownership transfer and fundraising is made digital. For instance, we have investor onboarding on our software, and the investor's decision is made digital, and the subsequent minting and therefore issuing of these equity tokens is also made digital. The benefits here are low cost and save time, obviously, easier global transferability, faster settlement, and high transparency, which applies to the CEOs and the management directors, the new investors and existing shareholders, because our solution kind of addresses both perspectives. On the one hand, the management board, which has the issuance and administration platform, and on the other hand, the investor perspective, which then can also verify themselves with KYC and the possibility to have an API for AML verification. The general advantages of our solution, I think, have been quite crystallized throughout my presentation thus far, so I will not go into detail here too much. Yeah, one benefit is here, for instance, that you can have a fully automated and remote process. You can manage these entities end to end and 24/7, and therefore, you know, our entire solution is aimed for the complete life cycle, not only certain aspects of it. So basically, you have a whole solution customized for our clients' needs, because we can also offer it in kind of like a white label perspective, and like when a client which has a larger project approaches us, for instance, they can have their logo and all these aspects there as well. Features of our software include also a digital share register, engagement and ESOP programs, and as well as digital asset investment and ownership transfers. I think digital fundraising has been quite clear now. This is how it kind of pans out, or just like to have it like displayed for you guys. You have the issuer token pad, which is for the role assignment, investor onboarding, the whitelisting, and all these aspects, and the digital share register, obviously. And then you kind of create these tokens to this token pad, and then you can also sell the market your investor suite, which will then be able to kind of manage these tokens for the token holders, the investors, therefore, which will have to verify themselves there, and then it complies with the Liechtenstein authorities. We meet the highest degree of customer satisfaction, because we have a customer-centric approach, as we believe we also have to address kind of, you know, people that are not too familiar with the blockchain space. So therefore, we also have a complete guide in place. We meet all the regulatory and you know, requirements. We have a high degree of implementation speed, and generally, in terms of our technology, it's very secure and reliable because we work with the, you know, best technical team in place. Also, a special a company here in Frankfurt that assists us on this, called Mikobo. We meet all the compliance integrations and the requirements in terms of KYC and AML, and collect all the necessary data from a shareholder perspective. And from our offer. We have knowledge, issuer token pad, issuer and investor software, and generally in the future also, which is our goal for 2021, we will basically also offer tokenization as a service, where therefore no setup of a legal entity is needed anymore through the Liechtenstein model, but you can basically do it through us. We are embedded in a strong ecosystem. I think I kind of also already have to update this a bit, this slide. However, I mean, on the one hand, we have legal partners like Nagel Attorneys at Law, which were involved in drafting the Liechtenstein Token Act, and so, technology providers like Mikobo, accelerators like BlockRocket, and so on. And on the other hand, also non-profit organizations like the International Tokenization Standardization Association, which is aimed to kind of standardize the token economy, which I think will be quite important for the future of attaining mainstream adoption. Our team consists of young and dynamic blockchain enthusiasts on the one hand, and then we are also supported by advisors which are quite established already in the blockchain space. So yeah, thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have questions, feel free to reach out now or later. Whenever you want, I will gladly assist you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas, for your speech and your presentation. Yeah, we do have a few questions from participants. The first question is, Nicolas, what is the difference in the legislation between Liechtenstein and Switzerland?
Okay, this is a very good question, because obviously we see that Liechtenstein, Switzerland, sorry, is also quite an advanced jurisdiction, obviously. I think just from a neutral perspective, the biggest difference between Switzerland and Liechtenstein, which by the way have a special agreement themselves in place, is that Liechtenstein has EU passporting, as Liechtenstein is a member of the European Economic Area, whereas Switzerland does not have EU passporting, or at least not in the same degree that Liechtenstein does. And also a core difference is that Liechtenstein actually implemented their own law for this, the Liechtenstein Token Act, whereas Switzerland kind of chose a different approach in terms of adding to existing laws, more or less.
Thank you for your reply. There is also a question, on your opinion, Nicolas, what is the best asset to tokenize?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I think this goes more into personal needs, because just from a neutral perspective, you can tokenize anything. And I think with for instance, real estate, it's a bit more difficult sometimes. So just to kind of jettison this aspect here. But what you can tokenize, in my opinion, is the best. I mean, our first use cases are on the one hand shares, because we generated our own equity for Amazing Blocks. So there's 600 Amazing Blocks equity tokens, which can be found on Etherscan as well. Also, I wrote an article about this as well, so you can feel free to read it on our Medium channel. But generally, I believe that, for instance, an industry that can really be disrupted in the future, that is from an investment perspective, has like a huge degree of intrinsic value, but is very regressive, is for instance also art, because just generally artists do not have, they have so many intermediaries in place there, so therefore tokenization can be a huge help there, also from a social perspective. And also what's quite interesting to me are patents and machines. The patents, why? Because patents are something that usually inherits a huge value in in a company, or especially in startups. However, there's no way that you can actually grasp patents and monetize them usually. And generally the process of verifying them in the different jurisdictions takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort and money. So therefore this is also a great system. And also what is quite interesting, and sorry for mentioning too many here, but this is just so exciting, is like, for instance, machines, like these huge industrialized capital goods, which are like a 60 to 80 million machine, that when you apply a pay-per-use model as well on top of tokenization, you can kind of generate a passive income in the future, where you own a fraction of this machine and basically have a daily income with, for instance, a machine that produces wood panels every day, will have like a fraction of this income that is generated with the pay-per-use model every day added to your portfolio. And therefore, I think this is also quite an interesting use case.
Amazing. Thank you for your reply, for your introduction, and thank you for the presentation. It's great that we do have already jurisdictions where tokenization can be done much easier than without these cumbersome processes, and cheaper, and thus more accessible. This is what we do really need for mass adoption. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.